Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Soulful Selfcare, the podcast where we explore the many depths of personal growth, self-care, and how to live a more fulfilled life. I'm your host, Beverly J. Miller, and today we're diving into a topic that many of us struggle with, but is so essential to forming deep, meaningful connections: vulnerability. Now, before we get started, let me ask you this. How often do you truly open up to those around you? Not just surface level sharing, but really letting others see your true self, including your fears, doubts, and insecurities. If that makes you feel uncomfortable, you're not alone. Vulnerability can be terrifying, but it's also one of the most powerful ways to strengthen your relationships. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfy, and let's explore together how being vulnerable can lead to stronger, more meaningful relationships. Let's start by breaking down what vulnerability actually is. At its core, vulnerability is the willingness to show up and be seen by who you truly are, your flaws, your fears, and all. It's about letting go of the need to appear perfect or in control and allowing others to see your authentic self. Now, why is this so important in relationships? Well, when we're vulnerable, we give others the opportunity to connect with us on a deeper level. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. With each layer that we reveal, we allow others to see more of who we are, which in turn invites them to do the same. This mutual exchange builds trust, intimacy, and a sense of belonging. But let's be honest, being vulnerable isn't easy. It requires courage to put ourselves out there, especially when there's a risk of being judged or rejected. I get it. However, the rewards far outweigh the risk. You see, when we open up, we create the space for others to truly know us. And that's where the magic happens in relationships. So, what are some of the benefits of being vulnerable in relationships? Let's explore a few. First, it deepens trust. You see, trust is the foundation of any strong relationship, and vulnerability is the key to building that trust. When we share our true selves with others, we signal that we trust them enough to let them in, and in return, they're more likely to trust us with their own vulnerabilities. It also enhances emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy goes beyond physical closeness. It's about feeling connected on a deeper level. You see, when we share our inner thoughts and feelings, we create a bond that goes beyond the superficial. This intimacy can strengthen romantic relationships, friendships, and even family ties. It also fosters empathy and compassion. You see, when we're vulnerable, we allow others to see our struggles and challenges. This in turn invites empathy and compassion, as people can relate to our experiences and offer support. In turn, we are more likely to feel understood and cared for. It reduces feelings of loneliness. Loneliness often, and I've seen a lot of this lately on YouTube about people being lonely. So, loneliness often stems from feeling that we have to face life challenges alone. By opening up and sharing our experiences, we realize that we're not alone. Others have faced similar struggles, and we can lean on each other for support. It encourages personal growth. Vulnerability is a powerful catalyst for personal growth. When we confront our fears and insecurities, we learn more about ourselves and become more resilient. In relationships, this growth can lead to a deeper understanding of each other's needs and desires. Let's talk about how to create a safe space for vulnerability in our relationships. After all, opening up requires trust, and trust is built when both parties feel safe to share their own selves. So, first, we have to establish open communication. That's the foundation for any safe space, a foundation that is open and honest. So, encourage open dialogue by actively listening and responding with empathy. Show that you're interested in understanding your partner's thoughts and feelings without judgment. And when you're listening, you're not talking, you're not adding, you're actively listening to what the other person is saying. Then be mindful of reactions. When someone shares something vulnerable, you see how we react is crucial. It's important to respond with kindness, even if what they're sharing is difficult to hear. Avoid dismissing their feelings or offering unsolicited advice. Sometimes all they need is to be heard. Practice patience. You see, vulnerability doesn't happen overnight. It takes time for people to share comfortable enough to open up. Be patient and give them the space they need to share at their own pace. And then we're going to lead by example. You see, if you want others to be vulnerable with you, it's important to lead by example. So share your own thoughts, your own fears, and experiences openly. This can help set the tone for the relationship and encourage others to do the same. Finally, respect boundaries. While it's important to encourage vulnerability, it's equally important to respect others' boundaries. Not everyone is ready or willing to share certain aspects of their lives, and that's okay. Let them know that you're there for them whenever they're ready. Now that we've explored how to create a safe space for vulnerability, let's talk about how to start being more open in our relationships. Here are some tips to help you begin. Start small. You don't have to dive into the deep end right away. Begin by sharing something small that you wouldn't normally disclose. As you get more comfortable, gradually open up about deeper topics. Use I statements. When sharing your feelings, use the I statement to express yourself. For example, instead of saying, "You never listen to me," try saying, "I feel unheard when I'm trying to share something important." You see, this approach focuses on your feelings rather than placing blame. Next, be honest about your fears. It's okay to acknowledge that being vulnerable makes you feel uncomfortable. Sharing your fears about vulnerability can actually be a great first step in opening up. You see, it shows that you're willing to be honest, even about your own discomfort. I can't say this enough. Practice active listening. You see, being vulnerable is a two-way street. When others share with you, practice active listening. Show that you're fully present and engaged in the conversation. This creates a reciprocal environment where both parties feel valued and understood. Embrace imperfection. Remember, you don't have to have all the answers or be perfect. Vulnerability is about being human, and that means embracing your imperfections. Allow yourself to be authentic, even if it feels messy or awkward. And finally, seek support when needed. If opening up to you feels particularly challenging, consider seeking support from a therapist or a counselor. You see, they can provide a safe space for you to explore your feelings and help you develop strategies for being more open in your relationships. Let me give you a quick tip about listening. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. To wrap up, let's look at some real life examples of how vulnerability has transformed relationships. These stories will highlight the power of opening up and how it can lead to deeper connections. And then, as always, I'm going to share my personal story. These stories are pretty short, and the first one is a story of a struggling marriage. I'm not going to use anyone's names or anything to identify them, it's just going to be very general. And in this marriage, the couple was on the brink of divorce, and they decided to attend therapy as a last resort. And while in therapy, they were encouraged to be vulnerable and share their deepest fears and insecurities with each other. For the very first time, they truly heard each other's pain and desires. This vulnerability allowed them to rebuild trust and intimacy, ultimately saving their marriage. The other short stories is about two friends and how their friendship was rekindled just through honesty. You see, they were childhood friends and they drifted apart over the years due to misunderstandings and unspoken resentment. One day they decided to have an honest conversation about their feelings. By being vulnerable and admitting their own mistake, they were able to clear the air and rekindle their friendship stronger than before. I too had to learn about the power of vulnerability. I used to believe that being strong meant never showing weakness, that vulnerability was something to avoid at all cost. I always pride myself on being the one that had it all together, especially in relationships. But that all changed when I discovered I had been cheated on. It started with a feeling, an uneasy, nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach that something wasn't right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I noticed the subtle shifts in his behavior, the sudden need to work late, the phone that was always face down, the vague explanations that didn't quite add up. Deep down, I knew something was wrong, but I convinced myself that I was overthinking it. I told myself that I was just being paranoid and that I had no real reason to doubt him. But that instinct, the one I kept pushing aside, was trying to tell me something. One evening, I was out with friends trying to shake off the unease that had been building inside of me for weeks. As we talked and laughed, my mind kept shifting back to him, to the feeling that I couldn't quite trust him anymore. I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that my gut was wrong, but the doubt lingered. Then, out of the blue, a mutual friend approached me. She said she needed to talk to me about something important. I could feel my heart pounding as she told me that she had heard rumors that he was seeing someone else. She didn't have any proof, no pictures or anything concrete, but the details she shared matched up with the uneasy feeling I've been ignoring. It hit me like a ton of bricks. All those times I silenced my own intuition. All the moments I brushed aside my doubts came rushing back in a wave of disbelief and hurt. I hadn't trusted myself, and now I was faced with the reality I've been trying so hard to avoid. I didn't confront him right away. I needed time to process, to figure out what to do next. But I knew I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. So I decided to do something I'd always struggled with. I allowed myself to be vulnerable. When I finally did talk to him, I didn't accuse or lash out. Instead, I told him how I felt, the doubts, the hurt, the fear that had been gnawing at me. I opened up about how difficult it was to even have this conversation, how much it pained me to think that he might be betraying my trust. And then when the truth came out, he admitted that he had been seeing someone else, confirming my worst fears. It was a moment of heartbreak, but also a moment of clarity. I realized that I had been ignoring my own voice, my own instinct, in an effort to keep the peace. But by doing so, I had only prolonged the inevitable. In the days that followed, I leaned on my friends and family for support. I shared my story with them, something I never would have done before, and in return, they offered me love, understanding, and a space to heal. I learned that being vulnerable didn't make me weak, it made me human. It allowed me to connect with others on a deeper level, to let them see me in my most authentic state, and to rebuild my life from a place of honesty and self respect. Ultimately, that relationship didn't survive, but I did. I did. And I came out of it stronger, not because I pretended everything was okay, but because I allowed myself to feel, to grieve, and to open up to the people who cared about me. Vulnerability wasn't my downfall, it was the key to my healing and growth. So, if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: don't be afraid to trust your instincts and let down your walls, even when it hurts. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from allowing yourself to be seen in your weakest moments. As we come to the end of this episode, I hope you're feeling inspired to embrace vulnerability in your relationships. Remember, being vulnerable isn't a sign of weakness, it's a statement to your courage and strength. By opening up, you invite others to see the real you, and that's where true connections begin. So take a deep breath, lean into the discomfort, and let yourself be seen. You might just be surprised by the depth of the relationships you build. Thank you for joining me today on Soulful Self-Care. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit from it. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, take care of yourself and those you love. Keep being brave, keep being you, and remember, vulnerability is the gateway to deeper, more meaningful relationships.